So when you are thinking up to a 10 lakh rupees car, but your budget is 6, 7, then instead of 3 years, if you go to 7 years, your EMI almost halves, right? So then you are buying a 10 lakh car at a 7 year EMI versus a 6, 7 lakh car for a 3 lakh, for a 3 years EMI. So
Hmm.
you are fulfilling your dream of buying a better version or a higher variant of a car. In the see, as I'm paying a EMI, my fixed monthly amount is fixed, right? I'm not thinking I'm going to close the loan in 12 months or 7 years or 5 years. And in both the scenarios, in 3 years, what is going to happen?
On the 37th episode of Let's Get Rich with Pattu, I had a brainwave and I asked Pattu, why haven't we ever discussed cars? And he thought a little bit and he said, I don't think I know too much about cars. But then I started to think much more about cars, Pattu. And it turns out to be such a big investment in people's life, right? I even did the math, and my insurance premium on my car is more than my medical insurance premium, despite that being a 25 lakh cover for my entire family. EMIs are involved. We dedicated a couple of episodes to homes and home loans and home purchases and how that EMI itself needs to be so carefully thought of. And you gave some thumb rules of how, correct me if I'm wrong, Pattu, but you said one third should go towards your EMI and not more than that. And a car is such an important decision, right? I did a quick Google search, and in 2022, we had 326 million vehicles on Indian roads, which basically means there's a vehicle for every third Indian on Indian roads. And I'm very pleased that we are joined on this call um, by a 20-year veteran from the motoring space in India. Um, and Deepak has allowed me to say this with full caveat to all you listeners. His job is about increasing sales of vehicles in India. So that you know that before we enter this call, but I'm sure, Deepak, we are very, very grateful that you gave us your time at such short notice. And I'm sure we'll learn a lot from
Welcome.
you. Uh, but before we hand over the mic to you, Deepak, Pattu, when you think about this world of cars and motor vehicles and its relation to personal finance, why was there some hesitancy?
I know nothing about cars. I have never sat in the driver's seat even. I have not even touched the steering wheel. The other reason is that, of course, when it comes to, it's a very personal decision.
Yep.
And of course, many people get it wrong about when they buy, how much they should spend for it, and so on. But yeah, other than that, that's the reason why I hesitated.
Pattu, before we move to Deepak, and Deepak, I know I'm really building the suspense for the listeners while with you talking. Pattu, how do you get around in Chennai? Do you have a car, a basic
No,
vehicle? Do you
no.
depend on Uber and Ola and all these rental apps? How is it that you take care of transport
Yeah,
for you and
so
your family?
short term, short distances, two wheeler, auto. I have trusted auto people who do it, and I have a cab, also a trusted guy for. And thankfully, I live near hospitals. One guy said, okay, that's all fine, but what if in the middle of the night you get a chest pain and you can't wait for an ambulance? That's when you know the importance of a car, man. Buy one.
Absolutely. That was my
So
next question, Pattu. What if in the middle of the night there's an emergency? But you've thought
so
of that as well. Yeah.
yeah, no, we are dotted with hospitals all around the place, so that's one of the reasons why I've been hesitant about buying.
So perhaps for you, it's been about necessity. But now, Deepak, coming to you, right? We live
Hmm.
in a country that I think it's safe to say people love cars.
True.
It is not only a tool, which is a useful tool, but it's also a status symbol.
I was about to
And
say
that
that
becomes more
when
the case
Pattu
the
said
north.
about, yeah, when Pattu said about the utility, today's scenario, it's more of the social status more than the utility at the same time in many, depending upon which part of the city or the country you are or the state you are.
Which kind of works very well for the industry you're in and your business, Deepak, which is to increase sales for luxury brands. And you've done that for years and more than a decade. But can
Yes.
I put you on the spot and ask you, what do you feel about the current state of our roads in India, which are chock a block? Getting from one place to the other is not a pleasant experience. Do you think it's time for India to really think about the number of cars it has and create policies around the sale of cars? I have some experience living in Singapore, and here it is so difficult and expensive to own a car. What do you have to say about that before we delve into the
So
entire
we are
personal
not
finance
in
angle?
that phase how Singapore is today. So it's a long way to go if you look from the per, the bandwidth which they look at from the kilometer per car available on the road. So we have ample space still available. And if you notice, the highest sale today are happening in the tier 2 and tier 3 city compared to the metros, because metro lately, with thanks to the infrastructure we have, yes, the roads are choco block, but with the metros and the locals, if you talk from Bombay, Bangalore, even for better Chennai and Delhi also. So out there, and as Pattu also highlighted, when you're in the heart of a city, moving around anywhere, it's just a auto or a Ola Uber, which is works out better. So I know people who owns luxury cars also, but when they are in the city, they prefer the Ola Uber option compared to driving their own car, because not only driving is a pain, parking is even bigger problem for them. So hence, when we talk from that perspective, in terms of increasing the number of cars, they are going to increase. They are going to explore for sure, but not in the metros. It's going to be the phenomena is going to happen in the tier 2 and tier 3 city. And when we talk about the luxury car also, even in this calendar, if you notice the 2023 status, the highest number of above 1 CR car are sold in tier 2 and tier 3 city compared to metros.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that makes me think about how we are at such a critical juncture, Deepak and Pattu. I feel all of our major cities now have had so much infrastructure work happening. I know for Bombay, it is a fact. We can't wait for all these metros to start, which have,
Mhm.
dug up our roads and blocked our roads for a long time. So I feel the next 2, 3 years is such an interesting time to see whether everyone takes to public transport, ditches their cars, and frees up our roads or not. Um, but this is perhaps all philosophical and macroeconomic. Our show is very strongly geared towards personal finance, right? So let's start off that discussion. Pattu, is it okay to categorize the type of people who want to buy a car as these? One who absolutely do not want a car for, you know, because they're not interested in it, they don't see the need for it. At the other end, there are very passionate car lovers, motorheads who love that thrill of speed, who want the most luxurious car, for example. But I think we're talking and addressing people right in the middle who have perhaps started off in their career, feel maybe because of family reasons or other reasons they need their first car, right? We are addressing that strata of society. Deepak, in your experience, I'm sure you deal with all kinds of people at the luxury end, as well as you've had experience with people buying out their first car. What are some thumb rules or guiding principles you would give such people? If you're buying your first car, please make sure one, two, three.
It all boils down to first what kind of budget you are looking at. When it comes to budget, there are two types. If you're buying an outright, of course, the total car cost, what it comes out to. And if you're buying an EMI, then what is the kind of EMI you're comfortable to pay in a month's time? It might be a 3 year, 5 year, 7 year, depending upon how much you want to fetch in. And the fixed EMI, and then you do the reverse match and see what the budget the car can put in your EMI, which you want to pay in for. So and so forth. So that's how the basic thumb rule should be. Okay, what outflow you are comfortable with. And then as you highlighted about the insurance part in the beginning of the show, so you need to counter in as an fixed amount to be kept aside, wherein the annual EMI, the insurance will be there, annual service will be there. So those two factors also has to be factored in when you're considering the budgeting of your car, and especially when you're buying a first time, you need to have this basic idea in place. So this is an X amount of EMI I'm going to pay, which is going to be fixed for 12 months, and then there is an annual cost of maintenance as well as the insurance amount which will come in.
Great. Okay, so latching onto that, Pattu, uh, is there any kind of top of mind math that comes to you with in support of buying a car outright versus taking it on EMI? Because I have a close friend who once told me you're an absolute idiot for buying your car outright. Right? It's much better to take an EMI because you've blocked that much amount of capital, etc., etc. So, what comes to your mind for that, and then we'll discuss EMI after that.
Yeah, so a couple of things here. Well, I think, like Deepak said, the budget. What is the price band that you're looking at? And I think your income plays a role in setting that budget. And I would say don't exceed your annual income in terms of a budget for the car, and that should be the upper limit. The lower limit is preferably lower is happy. You should be happy with that. But don't go beyond your annual income. That should be the highest you'd pay for a car.
What a great thumb rule. So, if the price of the car is more than your 1 year salary, net gross, I don't think makes a big difference. But, basic, that's a nice little thumb rule. If your car is worth more than that, it perhaps, but two things, it may cause problems. So, that's a nice starting point. Deepak, what would you say to that thumb rule and how would it affect your industry of a car not crossing 1 year salary?
Uh, I doubt anybody would be buying a car which is worth 1 year salary, because then they will be not moving above the two-wheeler in the market, and the automobile sale would have been less than half also, which is today. Because when it comes to salaried employee, I've noticed that almost 30 to 40, even to some extent 50%, if two people are earning, is the amount they pay for their car EMI. So that's my take on that. Legitimate income when it comes to salaried employee. Of course, in case of entrepreneur, there's a to it numbers which are there, which is beyond discussion.
But to having heard that answer from Deepak, do you have any thumb rules for EMI then? And how people should look at what EMIs they should save people? Because very clearly, a very popular part of the home loan episode was your thumb rule of it should not cross more than, one third of your monthly salary. Any thoughts about car EMIs?
First of all, I'm not surprised, but it's worse than what I thought it was. The amount of EMIs that people go in for. See, the problem is this for a typical salaried guy. They start earning, then they probably earn for an expensive phone. They get a EMI for that for a few years. That goes on. Then they want a car. That's for 5 to 7 years maybe, and then they want a house, and that's going to take them anywhere between 10 to 15 years minimum. So for the first 2 decades of earning, they're actually going to be spending a lot of their income towards EMIs. What about retirement? What about other goals? And they're almost thrown out of the window. See, I did a quick computation. So let's say I'm earning 12 lakhs a year, so 1 lakh a month. And if I want a 25 lakh car, which is like twice, is that all right? 25 lakh car for a 12 lakh income guy, Deepak, is that okay?
Yeah, possibly, unless he doesn't have any other commitment in terms of the housing EMI or the other source.
Let's assume that. Let's assume there's no other loans. And even for a 10-year loan, car loan, and a 6.5% or so, approximately, the EMI is about nearly 29,000. So it already hits that 30% of the monthly income mark just with the car loan. So he or she has to wait for the car loan to finish and then only start any other loan. So it's like what I said, you are a serial EMI payer. No, first for gadgets, then for car, then for house. So it's a big problem. So I'm only saying that uh, yeah, okay, you want a car, but think about your other goals as well. Make a holistic decision about where your finances are, and maybe you can live with a used car for a couple of years until your income grows, and then you can, buy a new one. So
And I just like to counter on the Patu part for the used car. I think we're just to buy the first car as a used car. From my opinion, unless you are buying outright, if you're paying your full money down, a used car always works out expensive than a new car, because you might buy a car worth 5 lakh rupees as a used car, and if you're taking as a loan, the finance on a used car is like say 11% monthly
Wow.
reducing basis, so that's almost 6% on the flat rate, versus a new car is almost 9 and a half. So the difference of EMI is worth to buy a 6 7 lakh new car versus a 5 lakh used car, and I have a peace of mind when it comes. Anyway, you're going to pay EMI, and at least you have the first 2 years of warranty and the service package, which might be possible in case of a new car versus a used car, which might be a lottery if it doesn't spoil in the first 6 months.
Such interesting feedback. Yeah, it's very, very useful. In terms of the EMI, do you recommend a 3-year loan? So I was looking at some data, Deepak. I think the
Hmm.
majority of people, which is 30%, take a 3-year loan.
Hmm.
10% take a 1-year loan. The next highest was, I think, a 5-year loan. And there are some people who even say, take a 7-year loan.
7 years.
And apparently for EVs, it could be 8 years as well. What is your recommendation? Largely, what do you feel is the ideal amount, or it just depends on how much you can afford?
Now, see, if you speak from, of course, Pattu is of the opinion of 1 year EMI as your car, but ideally 3 year span is good for a person who's going to churn the car in less than around 3 years. So that is first thumb rule, right? Because there are people who are churning cars after 3 years, they want to keep the car new. So for 3 years they use the car, the loan is over, whatever the resale value came, they put in the new car, and so forth. The lifeline continues. But that's subject to you're able to afford a car. But today, what happens is you're capable of buying a Samsung, but your aim is to buy an iPhone. So that kind of story is what we are living in. So then, what happens? A person is looking at a budget of 5 lakh, or as you said, 6 lakh car, but the 3 year EMI of that versus let's say a 9 lakh car and a 7 year EMI of that kind of works out quite similar. So now what
Wow.
happens? Anyway, I'm buying a car under EMI. I've already put in, let's say, as we are discussing first time car buyer, so we are sticking to the ticket size of up to 10 lakh rupees on the higher side, and of course, ideal first time buyers are in the range of 6 7 lakh only. So when you are thinking up to a 10 lakh rupees car, but your budget is 6 7, then instead of 3 years, if you go to 7 years, your EMI almost halves, right? So then you are buying a 10 lakh car at a 7 year EMI versus a 6 7 lakh car for a 3 lakh for a 3 years EMI. So you're
Hmm.
fulfilling your dream of buying a better version or a higher variant of a car. In the see, as I'm paying an EMI, my fixed monthly amount is fixed. Right? I'm not thinking I'm going to close the loan in 12 months or 7 years or 5 years. And in both the scenarios, in 3 years, what is going to happen? You are going to sell the car, you'll have some corpus left, you'll put it in the new car. In the 7 year scenario, you might sell the car, whatever amount you got it, you might have to use it to foreclose the loan. Ultimately, you are zero in both the cases. You are
Hmm.
starting fresh when it comes to 7 year car. In case of 3 year, you might have some corpus to put in as a down payment in the new car. So there are ups and downs in both. But looking at today's scenario, why a 7 year, or even for some matter, for doctors and for some salaried employee, banks are willing to give up to 10 years also, because they know it's a fixed asset. The resale is going to there for sure, so it's a low risk loan. So they are willing to give 10 years EMI also. So they are willing to spend higher, or rather buy a higher ticket size car compared to a lower end, because their outflow is what they are committed for, not the ticket size of the car,
Hmm.
or in so and so forth.
But you've led me to the next important part of this episode, Deepak. And what do you feel about this constant churn? Is it a good thing to sell within 3 years? Is it a good thing to use your car until it just doesn't run anymore? What is the financial angle to that? And Pattu, you can weigh in on this as well.
So my take is, if you are using the car extensively, it's good to sell the car after. It depends. In a metro city, it's good to sell after 50,000 kilometer, depending upon the number of years you have used it. And if you're on a tier 2 or tier 3 where the roads are better and you normally do long distance, your car, I give an example, like in a city you're driving 1 hour and you're doing 30 kilometers max. That's max, if you talk about peak Bombay traffic. So it's 1 hour is 15 kilometer also sometimes. Versus on the highway, you're doing 1 hour, might be 150 kilometers also.
Yeah.
So, so that's when, if you're talking about tier two cities, so they are driving more rather than sitting in the car for a duration perspective. So in that case, up to 1 lakh kilometer is what we need to churn the car, because after that the repair cost will keep increasing. Of course, we have come across cars which are done 2 lakh kilometer also. That's a different scenario. So your question on what's the good time to churn the car? It depends. Metro up to 50,000, or as long as you are, it depends. Many a time it depends upon the individual uh, wind flow, money also. Because then you might
Hmm.
change the car in 2 years, or less than 2 years also, and less than 25,000 kilometer also. That's an extreme scenario. But in a standard format, or in a long run perspective, 50,000 3 years or 1 lakh is what the ideal churn. hours, like what we have seen. And in again in the metros, the timeline is reducing. When once it used to be 5 years, 3 years, now it's less than 3 years, or between 2 to 3 years, a car changes the
Is there
owner.
an impact on the environment when this happens, Deepak?
In metro, there is no environment, so we can't discuss beyond the point. Yeah, in tier two, tier three city, because compared to the car, the metros and the bridges are killing the people with the kind of cement which the asbestos which is flowing in the air. But if you notice, most of these cars which are sold or rather resold are in the tier two, tier three cities. So the cars are not. It's not that you're populating the city with every. If we say Bombay is selling 500 cars or 1,000 cars every month, that doesn't mean the old 1,000 cars are still lying in Bombay. They are coming out of Bombay. They're
Hmm.
going out of Bombay or Chennai, basically metros. So those cars are going out of the metros. They're going to the tier two and tier three city because they are finding those cars cheaper, and they are buying those cars. And no, ironically, compared to the metros, the tier two, tier three city has a higher rate of outright purchase because they are of the mindset of, okay, I don't want to pay interest. If I have money, I'll buy.
Interesting.
Unlike the metro, wherein as long as I'm earning, I'll pay the EMI.
Fascinating.
So that's
Let's
where
move.
the environmental perspective, if you talk from metro, the cars are not there. So they are coming out of the city. So it shouldn't be a problem. And it isn't a problem so far.
But before we move on to the next big topic, which is insurance, here's your time to speak your mind about the environment. I know you're a really strong proponent for our future and what we're leaving to our kids. What do you feel about cars and this constant churn?
I agree with Deepak here. I think cars have become way more environment friendly over the years. Even if you ignore the electric vehicles, even the petrol based vehicles, even diesel based vehicles have become the exhausts have reduced significantly, and even noise. You don't hear the cars, the new cars. You don't hear them at all unless they honk. You don't hear them on the road. So that's how smooth they have become. So I think in a metro there are thousand other things that will kill you no than pollution from cars. So that in that sense, I think we are fairly fine. But I am a little disturbed by this churn rate that Deepak is
Exactly, right? I thought you were.
mentioning. If that's what's happening, I'm very worried. If people have money to do that, then I think there's no question. But do most people who churn, do they? I'm not sure. I mean,
Ask
I
your
that
regular driver, Pattu, what he does. Is he churning his car every 3 years? Or is he running it into the ground for 10 years? And
no, this guy has had the same car for several years now.
hmm,
But he's a long distance guy. I mean, for me, he does short trips, but he goes from city to city. So for maybe that will work better,
fair enough.
like Deepak had mentioned.
Quickly before I forget, speaking of honking, Deepak, I've always had this idea, right? Because I'm fed up with the honking in our cities, in our metros. Is there a technology which you can start where the honk will not work unless you're above, say, 30, 40 kilometers an hour? Because you actually need it only when you're at high speeds, not when you're stuck at a signal and, just honking because you're frustrated. I mean, how do we
For
solve
that,
this
we need to
problem of
speak
noise?
to. No, there's nothing to do. We can do that. Because it's a human tendency. Person standing, before the green light turns red, red light turns green, people just start honking. So, there has been many memes, and even the Mumbai police have done a nice video on that. By honking, the red light is not going to turn green fast. But there's nothing we can do because it's a mandatory. The horn is mandatory as per the ARAI norm to have it on the car, and it has nothing to do with the speed which you can work on. So we
Hmm.
have to live with that.
What do you think? Don't you think it's a good idea? You don't need it when you're stationary. You don't need it till you're
Yeah, yeah, of
10.
course.
You need it when you're at faster
But if you
speeds.
notice the highest honk, highest number of honk is
It's when you're
done when the
stationary.
car is stationary. Yeah, because nobody's bothered to honk if you're driving the car is at the high speed also.
This conversation can keep going on and on. My job is to keep us on the track. The next topic is insurance, Deepak, right? It's been a big topic for us on this show, medical insurance. How does one approach car insurance? For me, it was so eye opening because we do audio production, right? And we had to produce an ad for a car insurer. And for the first time, I realized you don't have to take the insurance that the dealer is giving you. And that was really, I had a choice. So, how does a first time buyer look at insurance? What are the key important parts of insurance to look at?
if we are talking perspective from the first time buyer, I would suggest that he should blindly stick to the dealer from where he's buying the car.
Why is that, Deepak?
The reason being, when you're buying the insurance from the manufacturer's deal, is buying a car from the dealership and the dealership is providing the insurance. So ideally, no matter which brand it is, they have a national tie-up with the insurance company which is going to insured with, and plus there are certain advantages or the coverage which they are giving, which hence the insurance cost is higher compared to the open market. And this I'm talking about the first year to start with. Second year also a similar story happens. Second year is where the plethora of option opens. First year by default the dealership is like kind of forcing you have to car, buy the car with the dealer only, the insurance from the dealer only. Second year the owner is free to buy the insurance from anywhere he would like to. But in that case, also it is suggested to buy the insurance from the insurance from the dealership itself, because the coverage which they provide ideally are full. Because the dealership
Hmm.
wants to earn more commission bottom line, so they'll try to put in every possible coverage which is required. Now, unless you are expert in that and you know okay, you don't need XYZ coverage or the a simple like today's with the new age insurance company coming into picture, there is a cap that if you're going to drive the car for 10,000, this is your insurance. If you're driving the car more than 10,000, then this is your premium. Do you need a red bike? You don't need a red bike. You need a key? You don't need the key. Now these things, all these years, you never knew that these were the part of the insurance which you need to select or not select. By default, the dealership was taking every possible option and you're getting a premium, which was higher, yes. You could have got the second year insurance kind of half the price if you have opted for, if you have got the OPC, you need the yes, no. If you, and obviously because every yes is to add the rupee value, and you would have said no, 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 and of course your insurance would have been half the price. But
Hmm.
subjective, you are clear which terrain you are driving, how much you are driving, whether the tire is required, whether you're going to lose the key. You never know, and that is why the whole insurance concept comes into picture, because you don't know whether you're going to require that or not. So it all boils down, for a novice, for a first time buyer, stick to the dealership is my take on that.
What about year two onwards? And I'll give you a perspective of on this show what we really want to know, right? For example, in medical insurance, Pattu highlighted the most important thing to focus on is room rent allowance. At the end of the day, that's the most important because there's so much marketing done that you need this, you need that, you need this add-on, that cover, etc., etc. So, what is the one important thing you should look at while buying insurance? And what are the different things? What is zero depreciation? What is all of that?
So, in the second year onwards, I would say you need to look at the depreciation content. Yes, your basic insurance is just a third party insurance with your self coverage, or as they call it, own damage coverage. Then it comes to the depreciation component. Then it comes to plastic parts, the metal parts. So all those component comes into picture. And if you foresee, especially in the metro where the touch and go things are quite common, so it's advisable to take the better one wherein entire coverage is taken care of. Else, from second year onwards, even if you break a bumper, straight 25% is going to knock off. And you're going to end
Hmm.
up paying that 25% from your pocket if you have not taken a coverage for that. Own damage is there, but the depreciation is not.
Hmm.
So that's where a zero dep, as they call it in the marketing term, is required for throughout the year as long as you're going to keep the car with you. And hence the insurance premium ideally gets expensive as the car gets older and not cheaper, which is the myth which they have. It gets
So,
expensive if you want to keep the coverage full.
if I've understood this right, this IDV of the vehicle goes down every year, right?
Yes.
Where does zero depreciation work? If you buy zero depreciation, does the IDV say the same?
So you are talking about return to invoice in that case, I suppose. Return to invoice is where you have taken a 10 lakh car. On the third year also, if you met with a total loss, you are going to get the 10 lakh back. So
Right.
that's return to invoice. That's one
And is that
policy.
very
A
expensive?
zero debt, I mean, you can say your first year insurance is going to be the amount of first year insurance. Let's say it's 20,000. It remains same every year if you take that kind of return to invoice kind of insurance,
Okay.
because it's going to cover full 10 lakh. Even though the car is depreciated from the insurance perspective, it became 8.5, let's say for the second year, but you are taking insurance of 10 lakh rupees.
Hmm.
So from that perspective, the insurance premium might remain constant more but not less. Now about the depreciation part of it, that's for the component which you're going to meet and repair or might replace it in case of an accident scenario. So those components are by default going to depreciate, right?
Got it.
Whether it's bumper, metal part, or any such thing, consumable.
Dear listeners, please bear with us. You'll see something looking different, but all three of us are in the same space at the end of the day. We started this episode at the morning of our day. We've had a very hard working day, and I'm so grateful, Deepak and Pattu, for agreeing to do this at the end of your working
Thank
day as
you
well
and
to
welcome.
complete the episode. Deepak, I have a quick question on return to
Ah,
invoice kind of insurance. Does
okay.
that help in resale value at all? Does it have any other advantage?
Nothing.
One final question, Deepak. How must one, as a new car owner, approach maintenance? Is it something very important to look at on from a financial, personal finance kind of front? Um, what is your take on that, on maintenance?
A person who is buying the car on the edge EMI, wherein his budget is very strictly spending from his salary perspective or monthly outflow is capped and is already overboard with that EMI, then maintenance is something which is seriously to be looked upon, because you never know, a smallest possible car will give you a 5 to 6 thousand car uh, for service cost. So from that perspective, it's better to have a insurance with a full, or you can buy at the time of buying the car. So many companies are giving a maintenance package. So you can
Right.
buy the car with the maintenance package, wherein that cost of 5 6 thousand of the service also will be taken care of.
A lot of people try and go to their local mechanic versus going to the dealer because they try to save money. Any thoughts on that?
I'm being a dealer myself, so I would prefer to stick to the dealers only. Yeah, after, see, as long as the car is even otherwise, I have come across car customers who have driven the car for almost 2 lakh kilometers, and every service is done in the workshop, and they are satisfied because, see, what happens in the open versus the company garage is we try to replace as much as possible rather than repairing it,
Mm,
whereas the local garage it works out cheaper because he's going to repair it. Now ultimately you're just making a makeshift arrangement for that thing to work for a little longer versus this life which is ended and which could have been replaced as an whole. So it's a, yeah, you are saying it's like you're spending 12 24 rather than 18 once.
got it. Okay, and one final question before we wrap up this very, very useful episode is, in 2024, what is your take? And Pattu, I'm sure you'd like this question also because you have a bent of mind towards the environment. Does it make sense buying internal combustion engines anymore? Should one just blindly look at EVs? Because, this is if somebody's looking to buy a car today, is it short sighted to buy an internal combustion engine? Because, does it even make sense? Because you buy a car for a good 3 to 5 years. What is your take
Hmm.
on this entire EV versus ICE?
Uh, it's still debatable because the infra is not yet up to the mark to go 100% EV to start with. But when it comes to ICE, yes, I would say stick to gas or petrol. Don't go for diesel for sure. If you're talking from long-term perspective, resale perspective, maintenance perspective, in today's era, stick to petrol or gas. Don't go for diesel at all. Now between ICE and EV, unless you are in the range where the infra is there, of course EV works out well. But if you're using the car extensively, right, then it does not make sense to go for EV at present, because if you compare a vis-a-vis, let's say a mass segment today, a Nexon, like a Tata Nexon petrol versus an EV, the EV cost is nothing less than 3 to 4 lakhs more compared to a ICE engine. Now you're not going to spend that kind of amount on the fuel to save or to get that ripe that benefit which is required by buying an EV. Plus the range anxiety is there.
Yeah.
Plus the if you're on the run, if you have a EV, you will require nothing less than 45 to 60 minutes charging pit stop compared to a 10 minutes fuel pit stop. So from that perspective also, it is better to stick to ICE for now. Now, benefit of EV is like for people who are having, let's say, solar panels, right?
Mm,
People who are using solar panels at home or in their bungalows, For them, EV works out better because it's a one-time investment. The electricity is free, they're charging free, so the running cost is as good as free. And comparatively, the maintenance also is negligible
Because of the
compared
moving
to the
parts are
ICE
much
engine.
fewer. Yeah.
There's not much parts to repair on. So for them, the EVs are best because they are practically just the one-time investment of buying the car. Rest throughout the car life, it's free. Just renew the insurance, maintenance. There's nothing to be as a fixed cost which is going to be there on the car. So it's varied depending from the market to market and the usage pattern which you're looking at.
Deepak, we are very, very ever so grateful. Pattu, would you like to cap up this episode? Because I think the people who want to take EMIs from the show is entirely about personal finance. And Deepak has given us so many valuable insights. From a personal finance, I think your key messages are if you're taking an EMI, take one EMI at a time, try and finish it off before you go to the next EMI. But overall, how do you cap up this entire personal finance aspect of cars?
First of all, thanks to Deepak, I've learned so much about something I knew nothing at all.
Thank you.
And I think the general idea is just common sense. I mean, don't go overboard. Sure, it's nice to have a car, but don't go overboard and make a holistic decision, because that's not the only thing you're going to spend on. You got to think about your long term goals. If you want to buy a house later on, you got to think about that as well. So make a holistic decision and proceed. That's it.
Thank you so much. One line that's coming to my mind, Patu, from previous episodes is as long as you know the cost that it is costing your retirement and you're aware about that, then that's great. However, if you're just spending blindly. But having said that, going overboard, Patu, after listening to Deepak, perhaps I hope you're inspired now to buy that Ferrari
Buy a car.
and match your goal change, which is in the artwork. Deepak, thank you so much. It's been a very delightful episode. We went in very different directions. We started recording in the morning, we finished in the night. Very, very grateful. Thank you, Deepak. Have a good night. Thank you, Pattu.
Thank you.
See you next week on Let's Get Rich with Pattu.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Deepak.
Pleasure
Bye.
meeting you, Patu. Same here.
Yeah, thank you, Deepak. Bye, everyone. Good night, Siddhant.
Thank you.